Okay, hi. So today we're doing the ratings and reviews tag. So this tag was made by Scott and Nelle at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and they tagged me in it, as did Brian at Bookish, as did Michelle Lexi. If you tagged me and I didn't see it, let me know, because I'd love to watch your video. I really love this tag, and Scott and Nelle made this along with a video where they asked a bunch of booktubers, including myself, questions about like their rating and review process. And it's a long video, but I would highly encourage you watch it. I'll link it, not just because I'm in it, but just the way that they kind of compiled everyone's perspectives and answers together. It was so interesting to watch, because we all come onto BookTube and the BookTube platform to talk about books in some capacity. And a lot of that capacity for some people, including myself, is reviewing. And so it was so interesting to just see so many different perspectives on like us all kind of doing the same thing, with exceptions. Not everyone is as much review focused, which was interesting in and of itself. But anyway, I'm going to get into the questions. The first one is to tag people. This tag has been going all over the place. Most people that I feel like I would usually tag have already been tagged. So, but I'm just gonna tag some people that I haven't actually seen them put up a video for this yet. I would like to tag Mariana and Mariana Mas Books. I would also like to tag Rosie, Sandy at Miss Reads a Lot. And I think that's all the people that I want to tag that I personally interact with, but I do hope that this tag kind of like gets out into other like larger channels, because I just think the philosophy of rating and reviewing books is really interesting, and like kind of gives you a better perspective on people that you already follow. So I'm just going to start getting into the questions. Question 2. How do you know you've just finished a good book? Is it a thinking or a feeling response? And I think that I'm going to kind of push back on like the question here a little bit, because I don't know I've just finished a good book usually at the end. Like, it's something that I've been experiencing as I've been reading. And this is kind of why I DNF. Typically, I can tell if I'm going to dislike a book fairly quickly, or if it's not going to wow me. And I've done this through data gathering of reading a bunch of books that I felt very meh about, and being tempted to DNF them, and then being like, it might surprise me, it might change things. And like, most of the time it didn't, and it was just an okay book. Usually it's very early on that I can tell I'm going to like a book. Typically, it's not until like at least the halfway point where I know I'm going to love a book. And a lot of the time, the love of a book can really depend on the ending. So as an example, one for me is A Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I read the first chapter of that book and actually didn't really like it. And then as I read, I started to like the book more and more. And I really loved what it was doing. And like, I felt like I was getting the author's intention, which this is going to come up in a later question. And finally, there was the last chapter, and it moved me so much. I sobbed as I was reading it. And typically, if something can emotionally move me, I'm going to love it. Typically. There's other things that have to come into play. Like, I have to like the writing at least a little bit. I'm probably going to need to like the thematic content of it. Really for me, how I look at a book is like, it's kind of like a present. It's a gift. It's a package. And everything kind of has to go together for me to like the package. So, every package can be, this is going to be a weird analogy, but every gift can be wrapped differently and presented differently, and I could love them all differently. But if it's like the gift wrap is clashing with the present inside, or like it's haphazardly wrapped, or, I'm taking this analogy too far. If there's just something a little off, then it's not going to be a book I love. It might be a book I like, not one I love. Okay, question 3. When you begin to form your review/rating, what is the first question you ask yourself? I have a few different answers for this, and it depends on like how deep of a read I'm doing. So if I'm deciding I'm going to review a book, which I generally do standalone reviews for science fiction and fantasy series, because I kind of have like a criteria I'm looking against when I'm reading those. I typically am writing notes down as I'm reading. So there's not really a specific question I ask myself at the end. It's kind of like I have for sci-fi and fantasy, I kind of have like a rubric of things that like it kind of like I want to see if it's hitting. Like, what's the magic system like? What's the world building like? Is there a lot of lore? And it doesn't need to necessarily hit all of those elements for me to like the book. Sometimes authors choose to kind of push more in one direction than the other. They might be much more invested in their characters than with their world, which is okay as long as like the characters are well done and it kind of all fits together in that nice gift wrap package that I was talking about before. And then I also do a more detailed read when I'm reading for a buddy read. So I'm taking a lot more notes. I'm paying attention to it's still reading for fun, but I'm doing more of an analysis while I'm reading because I want to have something to talk about with each check-in. So I'm just paying much more attention, not necessarily to specific things. It's not like I have a rubric I'm going against or specific things like, oh, now I have to talk about characters. What about the writing? It's kind of just things I start to notice as I'm reading. I'm like, oh, I noticed this about the writing, or oh, I liked this quote, or this was interesting that this thing that they did with the characters. And I kind of naturally like push towards specific items that I want to talk about. But then when I'm reading just for fun and I'm reading, like putting something in a wrap-up, it's still not like I ask myself a question when I'm done with my reading experience. It's kind of, I'm questioning the book almost all the way through the process of what is the book trying to accomplish and what do I think the author is trying to accomplish, and is that happening? And we can't truly understand as readers authorial intent unless we watch, videos or something. And I don't really do that. I'm not like actually interested in hunting down the author's intent, but as I'm reading, I get a sense personally of what I feel their intent is with the book based on what they're focusing on, and then I'm kind of questioning through the whole reading process. Do I think that they're achieving that? So that was a very long-winded answer. Okay. Question 4, do you do star ratings? Why or why not? No, I don't. I have a whole video on why I don't do star ratings, but I'm going to touch on something that I didn't talk about in that video, and that is that when I used to do star ratings, mostly everything I read was in between 2 to 4 stars, with a lot of them falling in 3s and like some falling in 4s. And I rarely read 5-star books. It was less than 5% of my reading. And it kind of made me feel like I was failing at my job of picking up books that I would like. I started to like question my ability to judge a book for myself. I don't know, it kind of became this like unnecessary opposition and negativity in my meta reading experience of being like, well, it's been 4 months since I read a 5-star book. So I just stopped doing that. However, I do rate books based on how much I like them in like a spreadsheet I keep of every book I read. So I'll just write down if I hated it, which rarely happens because I DNF, if I disliked it, if I was neutral, if I liked it, or I loved it. And it's not really something I track a bunch. Like I just that's like my gut reaction. And I don't share that on my channel, and I don't really utilize it for anything other than like if I'm trying to make an end of the year list of books I liked and loved, and those types of booktube videos that people love at the end of the year. That's kind of why I track that, so that I don't have to go back through all of my books and be like, did I like that? And like re-question my whole like however many books I read. If you don't do star ratings, which I don't, what language do you use to convey the quality of a book in your reviews? Okay, so this is interesting because I think that you can't really be objective in a review, but I recognize that like my tastes aren't necessarily aligned with most people who watch my channel, or most people in general, because we all have very unique reading tastes. And so I don't like to be really strong in my opinions about books when I review them. I am opinionated, but I don't directly say a lot of the time that I liked the book or I disliked the book or anything like that. A lot of the time I'm like, I think you'd like this book if you liked this book, or if you like these aspects of readings, or if you like this types of theme exploration. And a lot of the time I thought the book was okay, or it would be like a neutral read for me, where it was like, I can take it or leave it. It's probably going to like drop off in my memory fairly quickly, but it might work for someone else. So I still say good things about it. I think that that's kind of, in watching a lot of people's responses and like videos about doing this tag, I've kind of noticed, and in also seeing people's comments on my channel, I've noticed that it's not very clear which books I liked and which books I didn't like. Because I will have people say, oh, I'm sorry you didn't get along with that, or, oh, yeah, everyone's really seeming to love that book, and I didn't. And I'm like, but I didn't actually love that book. Did it come across like I loved that book? So that's a bit interesting, because I know a lot of people in this video are talking, in these videos are talking about how, like, they kind of relate, they follow someone's reviews, and based on knowing their tastes and how their tastes align with like where the channel they're talking about's tastes align with their personal tastes, they can kind of make a distinction or decision on if they think they'll like the book. And I don't think I insert like as much of my opinion into my reviews, which might make it harder for people to decide if they like a book or would like a book based on my recommendations, since I'm not necessarily telling you my tastes. I don't know. Let me know. Do you feel like you know my bookish tastes? Because sometimes I don't feel like I know my bookish tastes. So if you don't do star ratings, does this form an informal rating or ranking? Just to touch on the ranking part of that question, I absolutely don't understand the concept of ranking books. I was laughing when I was watching Scott and Nelle's video for this, because I was like 100% with Nelle, like, how do you rank two books that were trying to do totally different things in totally different genres against each other? Like, even if I love both of them, it's apples and oranges. Scott, you're wrong. I'm sorry. Okay. Let's see. Number 5, do you believe every book has its perfect reader? Does this contradict the idea that a book can be, quote, bad? I feel like I have very similar answers as other people to this question. I think every book can be loved by someone, and that book can be bad. I don't think that those are mutually exclusive phenomenon. I mean, most people are able to find flaws in the books that they like because, something else, some like emotional response kind of overcame all of the things. Like, we're able to overlook the things that are not perfect about it. That doesn't necessarily constitute it as bad, but it's not, we can recognize the imperfection and still love it against the imperfections. Number 6, what book that you hated have you recommended? Hate is a strong word, but I really, really, really don't like you. Sorry, Anyway, I guess if you get it, you get it. You're my generation. Anyway, I don't hate a lot of books that I read anymore because I think that hating a book is the reader's fault. I feel like that's a little controversial because I've definitely been in that state where I've hate read books, or I've reviewed books, or read a book all the way through and been like, this is bad, it's horrible. But just kind of going along with the question before of a bad book, it was a bad book for me, or it's a bad book for you, but you chose to keep reading it. At any point, you could have put the book down and just been done with it. And then you wouldn't hate the book because you didn't get to the point of hatred with it. Hatred's something that you build, you don't just read a chapter, usually, I'm generalizing, and go, man, fuck this book, I hate it. It takes time to kind of get to that point. You have to keep getting mad at a book over and over again, which means if we're throwing real opinions out there, you should have just put it down. There are so many good books for you out there. Why are you reading a book that you're not liking? Put down the book. Put down the book. Just put down the book, okay? You are giving yourself the hatred. You are giving the gift of hate to yourself. Okay. Anyway, I normally don't film this late. Question 7. What makes a book good, bad, or great by your evaluation? Okay. I'm just going to go with my gut instinct as opposed to, because we've kind of already talked about this. When I'm reviewing books on my channel, I'm reviewing it with the mindset that there's probably a person that would like this book. And so I don't really talk about this is a good book, this is a bad book, this is a great book. However, if I'm just going on my gut reaction and feeling about a book, it's just a feeling. I shouldn't say that. With a bad book, I typically have evidence to back it up in my head. I'm the dialogue was not very good, the writing was clunky, maybe the dialogue was clunky. When it's bad, it's I can feel the author's hands in it. If they're trying to emotionally manipulate me, people aren't coming off as realistic, something in it where I'm wow, I could feel the author's hands in a bad way. I know you're here. I don't want to know that the author was there. That's kind of weird, but I hope that makes sense. And good versus great, I said this in the video for Scott and Nelle's channel, it is just a feeling for me. I can like a book a lot, and I can love a book, and my review of those two things is probably going to sound very similar, but it's a feeling I have personally of being emotionally moved by a piece of literature that it makes that difference. It makes me feel something outside of just appreciating the experience of reading it. Question 8. When evaluating the quality of a book, do you have specific criteria or aspects of the book, such as character development, that you consider? Does this change if you are writing an in-depth review versus just thinking about the book for enjoyment? Okay, yes, I kind of already touched on this. Specifically when I'm rating and reviewing science fiction and fantasy, I have specific things that I'm kind of reviewing against. And I guess that I would say that's a genre thing. I don't have specific criteria that I'm reviewing other genres against necessarily that I have written down like I do for those genres. But with fantasy or, thrillers or mysteries or certain genre fictions, the language can just kind of be there to get the plot across, and I'm okay with that as long as I'm appreciating the plot. Meanwhile, if it's a literary fiction that isn't plot progressive, like the plot isn't pushing it forward, like you need some sort of momentum to keep me going, and like that could be the plot, that can be the characters, that could even be the writing, but you need something to kind of like push me into like wanting to continue to read. I don't know if I really answered that question. Question 9, do you consider star ratings or average ratings when choosing books to read / add to your TBR? Yes. If it's under a 3.5 on Goodreads, I'm probably going to question it no matter what the genre, because that's pretty low. I mean, that means like a majority of people, just knowing how people kind of review and rate things on Goodreads, didn't really like the book. So if like anything under 3.5 stars has me questioning, it's not going to immediately turn me off, but I will question it. And then anything under a 3, I'm just probably not going to add on to my TBR, because if enough people hated it, it's probably not a good book. Even though I just said, like, is there such thing as a bad book? I don't know. I'm just being inconsistent. What do you want from me? Question 10. Who on BookTube does reliable and interesting reviews of books that you know you can use to decide if a book is for you or not? What makes the review so good? Okay, so this is kind of an interesting question. I have 2 routes. Since we just keep talking about science fiction and fantasy, most people probably know this booktuber. He is very big. I use Daniel Green's reviews to determine if I'm going to read a fantasy book or not. I have read enough books that he has read, and I've watched those reviews to know that our tastes align quite a bit, and I kind of know where they diverge. To know if he's like generally positive about a book, I'm probably going to like it. I don't know if there's specific language that he uses. I guess I've never really paid attention to it. He doesn't really get super deep into the plot. He kind of talks about like specific elements of the book and what I think he thinks the book's focus is, and kind of dives in and like basically says if he thinks like the author executed things well or not. Okay, I've been watching BookTube for like 5 years, and I just started making videos of my own in the past year. And the people I've watched has changed quite a bit through time. I think a lot of us get in with the popular booktubers, which I'm not saying anything wrong with popular booktubers, but a lot of the time, the people I started watching, I don't actually align my taste with. It's just kind of like, that's how I started watching things. Especially after I made a channel, I started watching a lot of smaller channels. And I have not been watching people, I think, for long enough to know how much our tastes interact. But so I guess I don't use specific people. However, if there's like a book that I watch multiple reviewers who don't necessarily have super aligned tastes then I'm more likely to pick it up. So an example of that is Nupaming, and I've seen Brian at Bookish and Shawn at Shawn the Book Maniac both review and like love that book, and just the fact that the 2 of them separately liked it made me more intrigued in picking it up. So I feel like it's not necessarily one person that I go to, it's the interaction of reviews that intrigues me. Question 11, does that/those booktubers use different language than you to evaluate and review the overall quality of a book? So I don't know if I can really answer this question because I didn't have specific answers, but I would say that based on watching people do this video and just being more cognizant of people's reviews, I think that there's a lot of different takes on how to do a review. Do you talk about the plot mainly? Do you talk about your personal interaction with the book? Do you talk about do you try to be like objective and try to give like this very like neutrally like take yourself out of it response? Do you hone in on certain key elements like plot, like themes, characters? Like there's so many different ways to like look at reviewing, and I think that's kind of the beauty of it, because like listening to a cacophony of people do it all differently, it gives me a better idea of if I'm going to like a book. If everyone kind of reviewed the same way, I don't know if it would be as helpful. Like, I like when people are not like me and are super passionate about a book and like talk about their experiences with it and what made it so beautiful to them. And I like when people kind of do give maybe a breakdown of the plot a bit more sometimes and kind of show you how it's not actually like what the back of the book made it seem. I also do like when people break down specific elements that I myself might not focus on as much, and kind of delve in deeper to those things. I think that there's just so many different ways you can go about it, and there's not really a right way. And I think, like I just said, that cacophony is kind of what makes me decide if I'm interested in reading a book or not. But my battery is dying. I've been talking for a while. Thank you for watching. I hope you like this video. I hope that made my reviews make more sense. I don't know. And until next time, happy reading.